I've got not 10, but 12 random things that I've learned while making art. Now I'm just gonna try to make this really quick because honestly the 12 really random things are way more important, but I just figured I would explain how this all started. I had been wanting to be an artist, make art, create things for a long time. I had started doing watercolor paintings in like 2019, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know what I wanted to create or the subject matter that I wanted to paint, and I didn't know the techniques. It wasn't until 2021 when I got my iPad that I started consistently making art. And even then, at the beginning of using Procreate, I was really flaky.
Crispy crust.
Dang, flaky.
I thought I said flaky.
About making art because I didn't know how to translate what was in my head onto the canvas. Then fast forward to 2022 and the job that I was working at, our entire studio, it was shut down. So I pretty much didn't have a choice but to make art because for me it was like, I'm gonna be looking for jobs, but in the meantime, I have to make this art thing work. I don't have a choice. I've been backed into a corner and I have to make this happen. And that was when I started really getting serious with creating portraits and trying to get what was in my head onto the canvas. And that's kind of when it all just like happened and came together. Since then, I've kind of gone from doing digital portraits to now I'm doing a lot more watercolor and sketching and using markers in my sketchbook. I've been doing a lot more traditional art, but I still really love my digital art. I have a few things that I have learned along the way that can go with both digital and traditional art, and hopefully it will help you. They're super random. Some of this stuff, I don't know. It was like, I just did it one day and it was like, oh, it's so much better. Let's just get into it. Something like black hair, black clothes, even black eyelashes doesn't actually have to be painted with black. A lot of the times using just a dark color or even like a charcoal will just translate as black without having such a stark contrast. Even better, you can pick a color that is complementary to the main color in your art piece. So if your painting is mostly like oranges, reds, you could use a really dark blue for all the areas that are meant to be black or for your line art. Now with that being said, I personally love using black, especially for like the line art, to add like a lot of drama, a lot of depth, and it kind of just makes it pop. So it kind of just depends. It might work for some pieces, it might not work for others, and it's really up to your style. I just really think, especially when it comes to the line art, the black really makes my portraits pop. But for something like hair or a clothing item or, you know, an accessory or something, you might want to try going for a dark charcoal or again, like a really dark color that is the opposite to the main palette that you're using. It's kind of just like a pick and choose scenario. Something in shadow can still have a sliver of light along the edge. So let's say you're drawing a portrait and half of the face is in shadow. Something to remember is that anatomy is full of curves and angles. So even if this side of the face is in shadow, it's not a flat 2D object. So the light can still reach around the curve of the face and kind of cast a little sliver along like the cheek, the jawline, just any kind of edge over here. Obviously this is dependent on the actual lighting setup of whatever photo you're referencing or however you want the portrait to be, but I will say that I pretty much choose to use this in all of my digital portraits. And something about it, it's like that is what completes the whole thing. It makes my portraits pop so much more than without it. Speaking of shadows, let's talk about how shapes and the distance can affect how a shadow looks. Again, keep in mind though, if you're going for a really realistic style of art, it's really hard to put any kind of like rules to that. And I put air quotations around the word rules because I just personally think that art is one of those things that doesn't have rules or it doesn't need to have rules. It's kind of just, excuse me. It's kind of just what you want to do, what you feel is best, what you think looks good, and what you think portrays what you're trying to convey. So please stop. But anyway, so this is, yeah. Okay, so for my style of art, which is more like exaggerated features and simplified details, these are the rules that I typically follow when it comes to shadows. If the object is more curved, the shadow is gonna be more blurred, it's gonna be more of a gradient, the edges are gonna be very, you know, what's that word? Diffused. The edges are gonna be diffused if it's a curved object. This would be the case for the arms, especially the backs of the arms, the legs, the cheek area, the forehead, the sides of the lips, areas of the nose, so on. If the object is more angular, or if there is something that's casting a shadow, the shadow will be more harsh with a very distinct edge. If the character that you're drawing or the person you're drawing has like really sharp cheekbones or a very sharp jawline, so you wouldn't be drawing me. That was not nice of myself. Okay, but if you've got a character that's got like a really cut, sharp jawline, or if it's something like the lashes are casting a shadow, if they have a collar and there's a shadow being cast by the collar, or a piece of hair falling down over the face, those are gonna have much more harsh, more contrasty shadows. This is also something to consider though, based on the distance of whatever it is that is causing the shadow. Let's look at the shadow created by the nose. So the outer parts of the shadow, oh my gosh, the amount of times I say shadow. So the outer parts of that shadow are being cast by the nostrils. I don't know why that word cracks me up. Okay, and it's also closer to the part of the face that is causing that shadow. Therefore, because it's closer, that part is gonna be a more defined edge along the shadow. The middle of the shadow is being cast by the tip of the nose, which the tip of the nose sticks out much further from the face than the sides of the nose, the nostrils. So that part of the shadow, that middle section, is gonna be more blurred, blended out. Let's say you have a piece of hair and it's falling down over the face and it's touching the forehead, the cheekbone. The areas that it is touching the face, the shadow is gonna be really harsh, really strong edge. Where it's coming away from the face, so like around the eye socket area and down here, like if the piece of hair is kind of like away from the chin area, this is gonna start gradually becoming more blurred, more diffused. Did any of that make sense? I feel like I am so bad at explaining things. All right, have you ever looked at a portrait that you're drawing and thought, huh, the eyes look really creepy. The whites of the eyes aren't actually a true white. So what I do is I typically add a really light muted blue to the color. So on Procreate, you know, I'll just go to the blue hue and then I'll just drag it just slightly down from the white so that it's got a slight blue tint, and I never have it on the brightest color. I always bring the brightness just a tad bit down. It's just such a slight difference, so you're not gonna look at the drawing and think, why are the eyes blue? But it's just gonna kind of make it look a little less, you know, psycho. Also, try adding some shadow on the inner and outer corners of the whites of the eyes. If you took your eye out from your face, it's a sphere. So it's not a flat object in your head. It's got curve to it, just like we just talked about with shadows. Is there another word for shadows that I'm not thinking of? No. Okay. Adding just a little bit of a darker shade to the inner and outer corners is gonna really help give that 3D effect. And again, it doesn't have to be a huge major difference or like a really, really dark area. Just enough that it makes it look not so flat. Okay, for some reason this one cracks me up. I don't know why. And honestly, this is probably the most random tip that I have for you. The nostrils are not just two solid black holes in your face. Also, depending on where the light source is coming from, they might not show up as black at all. Firstly, figure out the lighting source. Figure out where the lighting is coming from or where you want it to come from. If the light is coming from like the side or a lower angle, the light would be going up the nose. So it would actually be kind of casting light up into the nose. You could actually add a little bit of a highlight here on like, what is that area called? The septum. Boom. Light could actually be creating a highlight along this edge of the nose on the septum. But if they are dark, here in this area where the nose is connecting to the face near your upper lip, that's gonna be kind of blurred out. It's gonna be a gradient going up into the nose. It's not gonna be a solid black dark spot. It's gonna kind of gradually go from light to dark. If you're listening to this video, you might want to, if you get the opportunity, look up and watch this section of the video because it's a lot easier to show it than to just say it with words. But I will say, it is such a random, tiny little thing, but once I started to realize that blending that edge made a huge difference, and it didn't make it look like the person, you know how sometimes your drawing you'll be like, why does it look like the person is like flaring their nostrils, you know? And it's because if you blend that shadow out a bit and make it not such a harsh, just solid circle, it'll really help to kind of dial it down. And it's such a small thing, but it can make a big difference. These are like the little things that you just don't think about, and then one day you do it and you're like, coloring in the base layer of everything that is going to be colored in your drawing will help you to then figure out the hue, saturation, and lightness for all of your detail work. So when I was first painting this portrait, the skin color in the beginning looked so yellow. Once I added that bright green that has a bit of yellow in it, it helped to sort of neutralize that skin tone, which obviously the skin tone still has yellow to it. It's not that the goal is to always have a neutral in between skin tone, because there are people that have really warm skin, people that have really cool skin. But if you want to have more of a yellow, warm skin tone, and then all of the detail work, like the shadows, are way too cool tone, it's gonna start to get muddy, and that's what we're wanting to avoid. If you go ahead and color in every single element that is going to have some kind of color to it, it can help you to then kind of sway which direction the detail will be. So you'll start to notice, okay, this is a much more warm, yellowy kind of color palette that I'm using, so I need to also incorporate warmth into my shadows and the details. If it's more cool toned, you would want to do more cool toned kind of details, shadows, more blues and purples. You can also see that I started adding the shadows and details before I had done the hair in that background color. And I remember at the first I was starting to panic, thinking I was ruining the whole portrait because the shadows looked so odd and dark and like the wrong kind of tone and color. Once I added in the hair color, it really helped to kind of tie it in all together. White can really, really throw off your perception of how colors are looking or how they're coming off. So blocking in all the elements that are gonna be colored in with that first layer of color can be really, really helpful. It's like when you see oil painters put a brown color, or I've even seen them do like pink or magenta over the entire canvas before moving on to actually painting. Or if you are looking for a sketchbook and you see those tan toned sketchbooks, that's why. Well, I think that's why. I'm not an oil painter, so but I'm pretty sure that's why they're doing it, is because like the white can be so, you can just kind of throw off the colors a bit. When drawing a full body, try to imagine, or even better, draw out where the spine is to help you figure out the flow and the pose of the body. This can also really help when creating a more exaggerated pose, and also to help you know if the pose that you're giving your character is actually physically possible. Although, if you want to give your characters the ability to do some crazy things with their body, go for it. This is kind of a big one, and it's one that I had to learn and continue to have to remind myself of every single time I go into a new drawing. Imperfections actually can really elevate your art. And I'm not just saying that to make you feel better. I'm not saying that to be nice, to make you feel like, oh, no, I'm not just saying it. It's true. I used to try to make every single pixel or like centimeter of my drawing perfect. Every single thing had to be perfect. Which honestly, like looking back at my art at that time anyway, it's like, whoa, what was your idea of perfect? Everything from the shadows to the anatomy had to make absolute perfect sense. But honestly, like it always looked so stiff in the end, kind of boring. There's a really big difference between not knowing what you're actually doing and just letting your art flow from your hand. The only person that will ever know or see a line is slightly jagged in this one spot, or a color is seeping into another color in this other spot, something anatomically doesn't make complete sense, is you, the artist, the person who created it. Everyone else literally just sees a beautiful completed piece of art. In my opinion, those areas where the paint seeped together, or something is slightly off, or a line got a little wavy, or the perspective is just a little weird, that's what adds the character to the art. And I mean that. In my opinion, I really do mean that. It adds so much more character. Because keep this in mind, there's a really big problem going on in the art world, and it is called a freaking eye, okay? And what does AI typically try to look like? Way too impossibly perfect. Impossibly perfect. And perfect, not in a good way. Look at all the AI art out there. I mean, you go onto Pinterest, and if you just want to type in like art, just drowning in AI. Obviously, AI has its issues where it literally has not figured out like how materials look. It has not figured out fingers and how many there are. And you know what? That's fine. That's like the first thing I look at. If something looks too good, I immediately look at the hands, and that's when I know. So obviously it's got its imperfections because it doesn't know, but everything else is just too perfect. This could be realistic, this could be real, but I can see where it was trying to add fake paint strokes. I'm getting mad just thinking about it. And even with those little additional fake paint strokes, it's still, there's something that's like, that just doesn't look right. It doesn't look like it came from a human with a soul. I'm so sick of seeing perfect. And I also put perfect in quotations, just like I put rules in quotations, because perfect just shouldn't even be a thing. I don't like it. We're all so sick of AI, right? Well, the one thing that AI tends to look like is just too perfect. So why are we wanting to strive for that? Embrace the imperfections, because if your art has imperfections in it, great news! You're not a robot. Congratulations. If possible, flip the canvas to check your proportions. I love, and I also hate this tip, because so often I flip the canvas and I'm like, what is this? It's so awful. But I also love it because then I'm able to go in and fix the weird, wonky things that happen. When you were in school, if your teacher ever had you read a sentence backwards to check for spelling and grammatical errors, this is kind of the same concept. Because if you're reading it backwards, you're putting all of your focus on each individual word instead of reading the whole sentence as a whole, and so your mind kind of alters it and just makes it make sense from start to finish because it flows. When we're drawing, we can have a tendency to kind of tilt everything in a certain direction or skew the proportions a little bit. When you mirror it and you see the whole thing flipped, then you're able to see where things got a little wonky. So if you're drawing in Procreate, you can go up to the wrench icon, canvas, and flip horizontally. If you're drawing on a piece of paper or on a canvas, when you're in that sketching phase, you can actually look at it in front of a mirror. So you can just hold it up in front of a mirror and you will see it flipped, and then that's when you'll be able to like catch things before you start painting. Isn't it super weird how our brains can do such crazy things? See colors in a weird way, like even if there was a blue light cast onto a banana and caused the banana to look blue, our minds would still see it as yellow. You know what I mean? It's really weird. Or our brains can like skew things and it can skew our perception of things. It's just weird. And that's why we should not be striving for perfection, because our brains are doing weird things, okay? We don't even know it. And lastly, this one is very important, and I kind of can't believe that I have to say this. References are a good thing. Don't ever feel bad about using a reference. I don't know where this idea of using a reference became a bad thing or became something that artists use against other artists. We shouldn't be going against each other anyway. Like, your art is your art, my art is my art, so on and so forth. Let's just support each other. I don't know where this idea came from, that if you use a reference, you're not good enough, you're clearly not a natural artist, like you shouldn't have to use a reference. That is just, I don't even have words for it. That is it, no. Don't feel bad about yourself. Don't feel like you're not good. Even Ricky agrees with me. Use references, okay? Don't let them make you feel bad about yourself, your talents, your art, what you do. Just don't. Like, I don't get it. I don't get it. Whether you get a whole bunch of references to come up with a concept, or if you want to use a reference to understand how a pose actually works, you know, because sometimes we think we know what a pose would look like, but then we start drawing it, we're like, wow, why does this look so odd or stiff, or like the body is just doing something weird. And then you look at a reference and you realize, oh, that's because like that part of the shoulder is actually back here, and you know, like this side of the arm is actually twisted, or to see, you know, to help you decide where you want light sources to come from. You can use them for so many things. A color palette, a concept, a fantasy world, a character, facial features, shadows, how a pose works, whatever. Don't let other people make you feel bad about using a reference. You come across one of those people, if they try to make you feel bad, it's not a reflection of who you are as an artist. I promise. I support you. And those are my not 10, but 12 really random tips that I learned along the way. I'm still learning lots of random things. I hope something from this list helped. And if you do try any of these things out, I'd love to see what you think whenever you try it. And if you've got any really, really random tips or tricks that you've come across as you've been doing your art and making your thing happen, please put it down in the comments. I just want to be able to help other creative people, other artists, other people doing things. Share, like let's share. You might be helping me out. If you've got anything, I'm really interested, I really am. A hummingbird just flew up and looked through my window. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment if you tried any of these and if they like helped you or worked out really well, or if they didn't work out, maybe, you know, why did it not work out? I'm curious. And then also, if you have any tips or tricks, make sure that you comment those down below. We are here to help each other. And I will see you guys in the next video. Love you.